Cheryl from Lakewood corresponded with us, and she said she's about to retire, and her husband is as well, and they want to downsize their large family home, and they want to move to a condo. She says that they expect a significant profit from the sale of their home. What might be some of the tax implications of selling our primary residence, and what are some possible ways to handle that net proceed?
Well, congratulations on the big move. I'm sure if you've lived for any amount of time in Colorado, you have probably a very significant gain in your real estate. So, always a great situation to be in. But yes, taxes can kind of be a little nerve-wracking of, ooh, how much is this going to cost me? And so you will have $500,000, assuming you're a married couple here, that is going to be taken off the table for capital gains. So $500,000, you will not have to pay. Anything above that, you're going to be paying capital gains on. So this is something that I'm glad that you are asking those questions prior to the sale, so that you're not having some unexpected surprises of, oh my goodness, this is how much we owe in taxes.
So a couple ways to mitigate that. Obviously, if you've lived in your home for a long period of time, you've likely made some upgrades. So if you can substantiate any of that capital investment into your property, that's going to increase your basis. So it's just going to increase kind of that starting price. So if you built a deck, remodeled a bathroom, things like that, that's going to give you a little more upside there in terms of, just giving your property a greater value. To increase that amount, you're going to be able to offset. One thing that you'll probably, potentially, depending on how much capital gains you realize, you might get dinged with an IRMA penalty. So you might actually see, and I don't know how old you are, you might be too young for this, but if you are of Medicare age, they're going to look at that and say, okay, if you realize X amount of gains, that's going to be part of your MAGI, modified adjusted gross income, and that could actually increase your Medicare premiums there. So generally that only goes on for a period of 2 years. But definitely something to look at there. So if you can find anything to substantiate some improvements on your property, that's likely going to be to your advantage there.
Interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, roof, HVAC, flooring, windows, all those kind of things. So a lot to think about there. But, the beautiful part of this question, Alicia, is trying to forward think. Before, it's not like they came to you and said, oh, by the way, we just sold our home for $750,000. Now what do we do? They're being at least forward thinking. That's what we love.
Yes, absolutely. And we've actually even done some planning where some of our clients were in the same boat as you, where they're saying, hey, we want to downsize. And we look at stuff and we say, okay, can you wait 3 months? Because that's going to make a big difference, push it into another year, so that we can be a bit more proactive with some strategies with taxes. So it is so important to, get ahead of it and plan ahead rather than, because once it's done, it's done. You can't go back, right?
Right. So. Reach out to Alicia, Josh, and the team and start the conversation about where you are in your retirement picture. 970-446-1234. Maybe you're thinking about downsizing and you hadn't thought of some of the things that Alicia and Josh dropped that knowledge to you. 970-446-1234. Kenneth from North Glen says, I have a disabled adult child who will need care for the rest of his life. My wife and I are his primary caregivers, but we are worried about what will happen when we're no longer able to help him. How can we set up our legacy plan to help ensure that he's taken care of financially without jeopardizing his eligibility for government benefits? And, I had a family member that went through this where, was an adult child that needed the extra attention. And this careful planning comes really, really into play here.
Oh, absolutely. And this is a great question. This is a great thing to get ahead of before, maybe some things happen medically and it gets kind of rushed. In this instance, this would definitely be a great sort of scenario for what we would call a special needs trust. It's a specialized legal arrangement. It allows a person with disabilities to receive, some type of ongoing financial support without, and this is key, without losing eligibility for some of those essential, what they call needs-based government programs. So a lot of things like Medicaid, which is likely going to provide some of that health care there. They're going to look at income numbers there. So you want to make sure that the beneficiary, the recipient of those assets, that's going to need their needs supplemented, like education, recreation, medical expenses that aren't covered by that. They're not actually physically owning those assets, that they're going to belong to the trust. So that is able to give some legal delineation between, you know, your son needing that, you know, those assets, or if the trust is distributing those on a needs-based sort of scenario there. So definitely having that delineation between the two is going to allow them to reap the benefit of you leaving behind that legacy, but without jeopardizing that government assistance.
Yeah, a lot to think of there. And Josh got to use delineation twice in the same conversation. By the way, Alicia and Josh wrote all about estate and legacy planning in their beautiful book called Peace Out, Retire into Your Go-Go Years. And you can get a copy of it right now. All you have to do is call and request it, 970-446-1234. If you are watching our social media feed, where you get to see our beautiful smiling faces, well, at least two beautiful smiling faces. The guy that is talking a lot is
yours too, Bruce.
Just it gets out of control. But 970-446-1234, or you can text the word KIT, KIT, to 970-446-1234. This is Retire Colorado with Alicia and Josh Lewis. I'm Bruce Steinbrock. Wayne in Meade says his financial plan looks good on paper, but he's worried about a black swan event. So I'm guessing Wayne keeps up on the news, because black swan is one of those things they talk about all the time. But he says something totally unexpected, like a health crisis or a major market crash, derailing everything. How much of a cash buffer should someone in retirement keep on hand for true emergencies? And he put that in quotations. Where should that money be kept?
This is such a great question, and something we talk about in such depth when we are creating plans for the families that we work with. So there's a lot of different things that we plan for here, right? When you talk about market corrections, health care crisis, all of these are things that we can actually get ahead of, plan for, and quite frankly, plan on, because market crashes are going to happen, right? The market goes up, it goes down. That's one thing that that's guaranteed about the market, is that it's going to change. And so we want to be prepared, hope for the best, plan for the worst. Everybody knows that. But in retirement, it's even more important, because you're needing that money right now, right? You're needing it in this next chapter of your life. It's not just like, I can let it sit there and grow for another 50 years. But also the healthcare crisis, right? This is something that we plan for in a major way, because when are you typically going to experience some sort of health crisis? Typically is when you're a retiree, right? Because you're older and you've got, maybe going into some health issues. But when we talk about some other emergency money too, I think there's kind of this misnomer of like, I have to keep a year of emergency money in my bank account. And that's what we've always been told when we're working, right? Which is, pretty valid, because, hey, if you got laid off, you need to have 6 months to a year that between now and you getting another job. Well, when you're retired, you're hopefully retired forever. And so the emergency money is a little bit different, right? Yes, you still need to have rainy day funds. You still need to have that quick cash grab if you need it. But you think about, what type of emergencies are you going to have? Maybe your roof blows off. Well, typically you have insurance, but maybe insurance doesn't cover it, or you need new windows or HVAC or whatever it may be. Those large ticket purchases, you're going to want to have, depending, again, and I think everybody's a little different, so I never like to clump everybody into one, but kind of depending on your lifestyle too. If somebody's in a smaller condo versus a 10,000 square foot home, probably a little different emergency account that you're going to need there, but you're going to want to have it liquid, and maybe making some interest, some high yield savings account or something like that. You can ladder CDs, that sort of thing. But all of these things it's not this is all kind of working together in a retirement plan. It's not just like, oh, well, how much cash do I save for a healthcare crisis? That's a lot of cash, right? So if you're just earmarking and saying, well, national averages, you're going to need $300,000 for a healthcare crisis, so I'm going to put $300,000 in the bank. That's not the way to do it. And that's really not the way to plan for healthcare crisis. So again, this is part of the retirement planning that we do at Lehman Lewis Financial Group. It's not just how should your money be invested. It's really digging into how should it be invested? How should you be taking income? How is that all going to be taxed? What about healthcare? What about legacy? But how do you keep your joy in all of that? Which is, hey, what do you want your lifestyle to be? What do you want your life to look like in retirement? So again, great question. I think, again, if you're questioning this, quite frankly, it kind of tells me that you might not have a retirement plan. And that's where we would encourage you to come in, talk to us, either set up a phone call with us or come into our office and meet with us so that we can walk through some of these things with you.
Yeah, 970-446-1234. We probably don't have time to be, fair with another question. But, Josh, we know we have a lot of folks listening that are do-it-yourselfers. And how do you help them, again, maybe shift their mindset? They can still manage some portion, right, and do their thing, but it's really getting help on the total plan. How do you help them understand that?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point where a lot of do-it-yourselfers they're centric on focusing on one thing, right? And maybe they're good at picking stocks, right? And maybe that's kind of their wheelhouse, and they might be really good at that, but that's obviously a burden of responsibility too. So more often than not, when people are retired, what do they want to be? They want to be retired, not having another hobby job. But then it's also looking at all the other aspects of the plan of saying, okay, what about the tax liability of, all these great stock picks? What about how are you going to handle your required minimum distributions? What about the total amount of your income? Maybe they're trading a lot in an after-tax account, so they're actually generating a lot of capital gains, which then dings them with IRMA. So there's a number of considerations that I think a lot of do-it-yourselfers aren't looking at kind of in a holistic fashion. So I think kind of being able to bring that all together and really just showing them a lot of different aspects of what we're accounting for within a financial plan is going to help them sort of look at it and be like, I never thought of that. Gosh, how do you account for this, that, or the other thing? So really kind of putting a big bow on it, I think, really drives it home for a lot of families. And the other, key consideration I think a lot of people recognize as they get older is one spouse is generally the do-it-yourselfer. Usually Mrs. doesn't have anything to do with the management of the assets. Sometimes they do, don't get me wrong. And generally speaking, men die before the ladies. So, it's kind of this idea of, well, who's going to manage the assets when the husband passes away? And it's the wife usually isn't raising her hand saying, pick me,
Pick me. 970-446-1234. We've got more Retire Colorado straight ahead.